Not all films get second chances, but these certainly did. These box office bombs went on to rake in millions of views once they were available to watch on Netflix. On paper, Reese Witherspoon, Owen Wilson, and Paul Rudd co-starring in a romantic comedy should be a guaranteed hit. Unfortunately, 2010's How Do You Know was far from a success. Written and directed by James L. Brooks, the man behind hits like Terms of Endearment and As Good as It Gets, How Do You Know sticks the actors in a love triangle. Witherspoon plays a softball player who has to choose between a troubled businessman, played by Rudd, and a friendly baseball player, played by Wilson. It also features Jack Nicholson in what turned out to be his last film role before retiring from the business. That was only enough to make How Do You Know $48 million at the box office, against a budget of $120 million. The massive budget clearly didn't help the film in its quest to make a profit. It needed to hit the ground running if it stood any chance of becoming a hit, but it landed to middling reviews. Variety reviewer Peter de Bruges actually predicted that How Do You Know would have a revival on the small screen, writing, "Like a pint of Ben & Jerry's or a box of Malamars, Brooks's implausible confection should serve its purpose as a bad day pick-me-up." That's exactly what happened during the COVID-19 pandemic, when this once-failed rom-com became a hit with Netflix subscribers. According to Forbes, How Do You Know was among the streamer's most-watched movies in the summer of 2020.
Oh, here, please. Come here. To people who make toasts.
Adam Driver has been involved in a number of box office hits throughout his career, with the Star Wars sequel trilogy alone raking in over $4 billion. That being said, his return to science fiction in '65 was an uncharacteristic flop from the actor, grossing only $56 million against a budget of approximately $45 million. 65 stars Driver as Mills, a space explorer who crash lands on Earth 65 million years in the past. He becomes responsible for a young girl named Koa, whom he has to protect from ravenous dinosaurs. The film was a potential franchise starter, but as Variety pointed out, that was entirely dependent on how well it did at the box office. Critic Todd Gilchrist wrote, "65 is a film whose past feels like it was 65 million movies in the making, and its future depends on a several hundred millions in box office revenue." While the box office receipts made for grim reading, 65 became a hit on Netflix. It dropped on the streamer around 4 months after its initial release and shot straight to the #2 spot of the most watched chart. It sat right behind the Netflix film The Outlaws, but only briefly. A few days later, 65 leapfrogged the Netflix original comedy into the top spot. Unfortunately for fans of the prehistoric sci-fi flick, topping the Netflix most watched list doesn't necessarily mean a sequel will happen. There's nothing like a good old-fashioned buddy comedy, and no one knows this better than Shane Black. After making a name for himself as a sharp young writer in his script for Lethal Weapon, he tried out multiple takes on the formula, but he truly perfected it with The Nice Guys in 2016. Unfortunately, most people didn't realize that until the movie had already left theaters, having made just $71 million against a $50 million budget. The Nice Guys stars Ryan Gosling as Holland March, a 1970s private eye hired to search for a missing girl. He ends up crossing paths with Russell Crowe's Jackson Healy, a thug for hire who's been sent to rough him up. Once the two settle their differences, they partner up to try and find an anti-pollution protester whose life is in peril, and they take March's daughter Holly along for the ride. The Nice Guys was added to Netflix's library in August 2022, and it became an immediate hit with subscribers. It only took 1 day for the film to break into the top most watched movies on the platform. Nowadays, The Nice Guys 2 is one of the most commonly requested sequels online, but sadly, the poor box office showing means that probably won't happen.
This is not you. You're not a murderer. She just said she killed 3 people. I know, but I'm saying deep down.
Horror and fantasy specialist Guillermo del Toro has had a few box office successes over the years, but his 2015 effort, Crimson Peak, wasn't his finest hour in terms of box office receipts. The film stars Mia Wasikowska as an author who travels with her husband and his sister, played by Tom Hiddleston and Jessica Chastain, to a haunted English mansion where she begins to uncover secrets about her in-laws. What follows is a bloody good time, but not enough people were willing to give it a shot upon its release. According to del Toro himself, the problem was that the budget was simply too high. The director told Deadline, "If I'd done Crimson Peak for $25 million, the movie would have been a success because it made $75 million. But because I made it for $50 million, it wasn't a success because it needed to do $150 million. The movie gained a cult audience in the years that followed, and finally had its moment when it claimed a spot on the streamer's most watched movies list in spring 2021. Maybe it's because Hiddleston and Del Toro are even more popular now, but regardless, it's nice that people have finally made their way to Crimson Peak. Writer-director Alex Garland followed up his AI romance Ex Machina with Annihilation, a sci-fi horror that provoked strong reactions, both positive and negative. When a group of researchers enters a mysterious reality-warping zone called the Shimmer, they find themselves changed by what they find, quite literally. Natalie Portman, Oscar Isaac, Tessa Thompson, and Jennifer Jason Leigh round out the cast of this colorful yet incredibly dangerous odyssey. The film had all the makings of a potential blockbuster, but underwhelming test screenings derailed its release. Producers began to clash over how to handle the movie, with some calling for changes in order to make Annihilation appeal to a wider audience, while others defended Garland's vision. In the end, a middle ground was reached. Paramount released the movie in cineplexes throughout North America and China, and Netflix, which agreed to cover a large percentage of the reported $55 million budget, made it available to stream in a number of other countries just 17 days later. The result was a poor box office haul of $43 million. From the outside, it seemed like Netflix had overpaid for a film that average moviegoers found to be too highbrow. However, the producers who wanted to essentially dumb the film down were eventually proven wrong when Annihilation blew up on Netflix once it became available to stream in the USA. Garland's gripping film burst into the top 10 in July 2023. How soon is too soon for a movie based on a viral news story? Apparently 2 years is. Moviegoers weren't interested in seeing 2023's Dumb Money, director Craig Gillespie's film about the GameStop short squeeze of January 2021. Despite an all-star cast including Paul Dano, America Ferrera, and Seth Rogen, Dumb Money only grossed $20.7 million at the box office, just a tad more than two-thirds of its $30 million budget. Dano takes center stage as Keith Gill, the eccentric investor whose posts on YouTube and Reddit helped convince people across America to invest in a failing video game retail store. The price of GameStop stocks skyrocketed, making a lot of retail traders very happy and a handful of financial power players extremely worried.
How much did we lose today?
$1 billion.
Even though the box office numbers for Dumb Money failed to go to the moon, the movie still managed to become a sleeper hit with streamer audiences. In January 2024, it entered Netflix's top 10 most viewed chart at number 8, with an estimated 3.5 million views. If you're a fan of financial biopics like Moneyball and The Big Short, you might want to consider adding to those numbers and making that line go up. The Little Things debuted in cinemas and on HBO Max simultaneously, which is probably why it pulled in just $29.7 million from a $30 million budget. Underwhelming reviews certainly didn't help. As The Guardian critic Benjamin Lee wrote, "It's a drab, self-important procedural that can't quite decide if it wants to be thrilling or thoughtful." Still, it was a surprise that the film didn't catch on, considering the talent in front of the camera. Denzel Washington is a California sheriff who teams up with a detective played by Rami Malek to investigate a murder case, which leads them to suspect an enigmatic man portrayed by Jared Leto. The film spent years in development hell before it actually came to fruition. Screenwriter John Lee Hancock nearly got the likes of Steven Spielberg and Clint Eastwood to direct it at different points in time. But in the end, he decided to helm the picture himself. He probably had some regrets once the box office numbers began to roll in, but there's no doubt he felt vindicated when The Little Things blew up on Netflix in April 2024. The Wrap reported, the film was seen in 1.7 million US households in the week after it was added to the Netflix library. Once upon a time, the pairing of Drew Barrymore and Adam Sandler was a huge draw for moviegoers. The two starred in The Wedding Singer in 1998, then reunited in 2004 for 50 First Dates, which raked in over $123 million and $198 million in the global box office, respectively. However, the 2014 film Blended was more of a disappointment in that department, turning $40 million into only $46 million at the domestic box office. Overseas sales softened the blow, but the film was seen as a box office flop, considering the star power of the leads. Then Warner Brothers president of domestic distribution Dan Feldman blamed the film's Memorial Day weekend release for its poor showing. The holiday was graced by good weather that kept families away from theaters, he claimed, telling The Hollywood Reporter, "The A- cinema score will help grow our box office as we continue into the lucrative summer playtime."
That's nice.
It ended up taking a decade for the film to finally find its audience. In May 2024, reports confirmed that Blended had become one of the top 5 most watched films on the platform in the US. Adam Sandler's movies continue to do well on Netflix in the post-pandemic era, with his deal with the platform resulting in a steady stream of new films for families to enjoy. Back in the early 2000s, having Peter Jackson's name on a movie meant big box office returns. His The Lord of the Rings trilogy made boatloads of money between 2001 and 2003, and Jackson's King Kong became Universal's fourth biggest grosser of all time after its release in 2005. Unfortunately, Jackson's name on the poster wasn't enough to propel Mortal Engines to box office glory. Directed by Christian Rivers but co-written and produced by Jackson, Mortal Engines is an adaptation of Philip Reeves's 2001 novel. Taking place in a dystopia full of constantly moving cities, it centers on a rebel who aims to take down an authoritarian leader. So nothing groundbreaking, but it definitely brings a new meaning to the term hostile architecture. Reeve felt that the Mortal Engines movie was a worthy adaptation of his book and encouraged people to watch it on the big screen. But not enough people listened. Despite Jackson's involvement and some impressive trailers, the film made less than $84 million on a $150 million budget. While people didn't turn out at cinemas, they sure tuned in to see the action on Netflix. In April 2024, the failed blockbuster barged its way into the streamer's top 10 most watched list. After writer and director Florian Zeller received award buzz in 2020 for his debut film, The Father, he followed it up with his sophomore effort, The Son. Despite the similar titles, the films tell two completely separate stories. All they have in common is Zeller, Anthony Hopkins, and a whole lot of moments meant to make you cry. In The Son, Hugh Jackman plays a father who's forced to confront his teenage son's struggle with depression, his complicated relationship with his estranged ex-wife, and his troubled relationship with his own dad. It received a 1-star review from Roger Ebert.com, with critic Nell Minow writing, "The Son is well-intentioned but poorly constructed, counting on sympathy for characters who seem to be living in an alternate universe where teenagers have never struggled with mental illness." The Son was similarly hammered by the majority of critics, which is why it came as a bit of a surprise when it reached the number 4 spot on Netflix's movie charts after debuting on the platform in 2023. It was a far cry from its box office turnout, as the much-maligned film grossed only $3.6 million and left theaters after 4 weeks. What is there to say about Madam Web that hasn't already been said? The 2024 addition to Sony's Spider-Man-less Spider-Man universe became a laughingstock online for its bizarre line reads, nonsensical plot, and the fact that the villain was in the Amazon with the main character's mom when she was researching spiders right before she died.
Oh, that's really funny. You're such a funny guy.
Dakota Johnson stars as Cassandra Webb, a paramedic who begins experiencing visions of the future that lead her to protect a trio of teenage girls from the villainous Ezekiel Sims. The film was lampooned by critics who weren't impressed with the assortment of baffling directions it goes in. Lovia Jacque wrote for The Hollywood Reporter, "It is an airless and stilted endeavor driven by a mechanical screenplay. Its lack of imagination would be astounding if it wasn't so expected. You don't need clairvoyance to predict what happens next." Madam Web pulled in just over $100 million, which, considering it cost between $80 and $100 million to make, alongside its reported marketing costs of anywhere between $40 and $100 million, represents a massive failure for Sony. When Madam Web was released on Netflix mere months after its theatrical run, people seemingly wanted to see all the awful editing and stilted performances for themselves. It swung straight into the top 10 in May 2024, debuting in second place with 10.8 million views in its first week.